December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns. But as the smoke clears, another crisis emerges. One that doesn't involve warships or fighter planes. It's shelter. Within 72 hours of the attack, American forces across the Pacific are exposed, literally. From Wake Island to the Philippines, soldiers are sleeping in canvas tents that can't survive more than a few weeks in tropical monsoons. Tents collapse. Men wake up soaked, boots full of water, uniforms growing mold overnight. Pneumonia cases spike. Entire ammo depots flood. And suddenly, the War Department realizes something chilling. They're losing the war to the weather. Wooden barracks won't solve the problem. They take skilled labor, weeks to build, and more lumber than remote islands can possibly supply. The Navy does the math. Building proper housing with conventional methods could take 18 months, time they don't have. They need housing for tens of thousands of men now. Not in a year, not in a month, now. The British offer a glimmer of hope. Since World War I, they've used something called the Quonset Hut, a corrugated steel, half-cylinder shelter that resists sandstorms and can be assembled without skilled labor. But it's far from perfect. It's heavy. It needs cranes to lift the panels. Its ventilation was made for deserts, not tropical humidity. Worst of all, it requires custom concrete foundations. On paper, it works. In the Pacific, it fails. The U.S. engineers face an impossible equation. They need a building that can be mass-produced like a car, shipped 10,000 miles across submarine-infested waters, and built by exhausted 19-year-olds who've never held a wrench. It has to survive 130-degree heat, typhoons with 150 km/h winds, monsoons that dump 15 inches of rain in 6 hours, and, just for good measure, Japanese bombs. The standard tent costs $12 but lasts 3 weeks in the jungle. A wooden barracks costs $8,000 and takes 6 weeks to build. Neither works for a war that's moving island to island, faster than construction crews can sail. And so, the Navy calls on every engineering firm, every university research lab, every steel fabricator in the country. The mission? Create a building that costs less than $1,000, weighs less than a Jeep, fits on one railroad car, assembles in a single day with basic tools, and survives conditions that destroy permanent buildings. It's February 1942, and somewhere in Rhode Island, a team of engineers gathers at a newly established Navy facility. Their challenge: solve the greatest wartime construction crisis the U.S. has ever faced. One idea dominates the early conversations. Use arch geometry. A structure shaped like a tunnel might shed rain, deflect wind, and eliminate the need for heavy internal framing. It might even survive a bombing run. Maybe. But the clock is ticking. In the Pacific, men are dying not from enemy fire, but from exposure, infection, and rot. Respiratory illnesses are hospitalizing more troops than gunfire. Bases are literally sinking into the jungle. This isn't just about comfort. It's about combat readiness. The war will be won or lost on the front lines, but only if soldiers have dry boots, clean uniforms, and a place to sleep that doesn't collapse in the middle of the night. The U.S. military doesn't just need a building. It needs a miracle of engineering. And fast. The Navy's call to action lands in the hands of an eclectic group. Steel barn designers, wartime architects, and engineers who've stared down typhoons in person. They're stationed at Quonset Point, Rhode Island, a former air station turned emergency think tank. Here, function matters more than form. They're not chasing architectural beauty. They're trying to keep Marines alive. British engineers ship over the blueprints for the Quonset Hut, hoping their World War I solution might spark something new. It's a promising start. The curved arch shape naturally deflects wind, sheds rain, and requires no complicated joinery. But the problems leap off the page. 3-ton weight, poor ventilation, concrete foundations, and a termite buffet of wooden framing. In the Pacific, This isn't just inconvenient, it's fatal. Commander John Philip Drosfeld of the Navy's Bureau of Yards and Docks reviews the plans and starts slashing red ink through every flaw. Next to him, Otto Brandenberger from the Strand Steel Corporation offers a radical alternative. Eliminate the internal frame entirely. Make the outer steel shell structural. No wood, no foundation. Just curved, corrugated panels that hold themselves up. At the time, this idea is considered architectural heresy. Buildings need skeletons, or so says conventional wisdom. But Brandenberger's background is barns, specifically prefab steel barns that survive tornadoes across the Midwest. He knows arch structures don't just look strong. They are strong. And if a barn in Kansas can survive 120 mph winds, maybe a steel tube can stand up to a Pacific typhoon. The team also draws inspiration from an unlikely prophet, Buckminster Fuller. Though never formally consulted, Fuller's published theories on mass-produced housing read like war plans. His Dymaxion philosophy, treat buildings like machines, not handcrafted monuments, fits the Navy's needs perfectly. Fast to make, fast to ship, fast to assemble. Within days, Quonset Point becomes a 24/7 lab. Engineers sketch by day, prototype by night, and test by dawn. Metal shops hum around the clock. There's no time for traditional architectural drawings. Instead, they build to learn. The floor becomes a battlefield of bent panels, stripped bolts, and failed joints. Every mistake feeds the next iteration. Shipping constraints drive every decision. Rail cars max out at 16 feet wide. Panels must be light enough for 4 men to carry. The final size? 16 feet wide, 48 feet long, housing 36 men with bunks. Big enough for offices, medical tents, or mess halls. Small enough to load onto a flatbed. They spend 2 whole weeks calculating the ideal curve. Too flat, and the wind rips the structure apart. Too steep, and it wastes interior space. Eventually, they settle on an 8-foot radius, a perfect half-circle, with enough headroom to stand upright and the structural integrity to distribute loads evenly. Each corrugated steel panel weighs under 50 pounds and bolts to the next, using standardized 3/20-inch fasteners spaced every 6 inches. This spacing transforms the shell into a compression ring, where every piece shares the load. It's the same principle behind Roman arches, except now it's being built for war. By May 25, 1942, they have a prototype. 6 sailors, no construction experience, bolted together using nothing but wrenches. 14 hours later, the hut stands. It's crude. It's ugly. But it works. And when they remove the floor, a frequent point of failure in jungle environments, assembly time drops by half. The impossible is starting to look possible. A lightweight, storm-proof prefab building that can be mass-produced, flat-packed, shipped anywhere in the world, and assembled by tired young men in the mud. The Quonset Hut is almost born. June 1942. The first production-ready Quonset Huts roll off the line, loaded onto rail cars, shipped to West Coast ports, then packed into Liberty ships, bound for war. On paper, they're perfect. In the field, they're about to face the most brutal product testing imaginable. Across jungles, volcanic islands, and Arctic winds. Guadalcanal. August 1942. Marines, under constant Japanese bombardment, begin erecting huts just hours after landing. In coconut groves scarred by artillery, 6-man teams bolt steel panels together while enemy shells fall nearby. Within 12 hours, 10 Quonset Huts stand on the edge of Henderson Field, housing maintenance crews for the battered F-4F Wildcat fighters. 3 days later, a 500-pound bomb detonates 40 yards away. Canvas tents vanish in the blast. The Quonset? Dented, but still standing. Every man inside survives. This isn't a fluke. It's physics. The curved arch deflects wind and blast waves rather than absorbing them. Corrugations add rigidity. And each bolted joint contributes to a system that's more cable than wall, flexible under pressure, strong under stress. But the environment proves just as deadly as the enemy. In the Philippines, high humidity and salt air corrode ungalvanized parts within weeks. Marines sleep under dripping ceilings as condensation forms inside the hut each night. Tropical fungi grow on walls. It becomes clear steel alone isn't enough. Back at Quonset Point, engineers respond quickly. They mandate hot-dip galvanization, coating every steel component in molten zinc to resist corrosion. Ventilation gets an overhaul. Ridge vents, end louvers, and optional side openings improve airflow and reduce condensation. Every fastener, even those hidden inside wall joints, is upgraded to resist rust. Later models become fully weather-sealed, livable even in the wettest jungles. Then comes Iwo Jima. February 1945. Crews arrive 2 days after the initial invasion. The volcanic sand defies conventional anchoring. Steel stakes won't hold. So, Seabees improvise. They fill oil drums with sand and use them as deadweight anchors, connecting huts with tensioned cables. A typhoon in March hits with 110 mph winds. Wooden structures shatter. The Quonsets? Still standing. In Alaska's Aleutian Islands, Quonsets face a new kind of enemy. 40-degree-foot temperatures, 100 mph Arctic winds, and brittle steel. Early models crack at bolt holes. So engineers swap in cold-rolled steel alloys, add rubber gaskets between panels, and insulate the interiors. Heating the huts creates more condensation, so ventilation is redesigned again to keep warmth in while letting moisture out. North Africa delivers the blast test. In Sicily, a German 80 mm shell hits a Quonset hut, serving as an ammo depot. The explosion blows out the sides, but the arched roof remains partially intact. Engineers note that a rectangular structure would have collapsed inward. The Quonset's arched geometry channels force outward, an unintended but life-saving feature. And then comes the storm of storms. Typhoon Cobra. December 1944. Winds reach 140 mm. Bases across the Philippines report catastrophic damage. Concrete buildings crack. Wooden structures evaporate. But of 43 Quonset huts at one base, 39 survive intact. The other 4 suffer damage, but remain standing. Engineers reviewing the wreckage conclude that anchoring is everything. Huts that were properly tied down ride out the storm. Those that weren't, don't. Every battle, every storm, every climate becomes a test site. Field crews send reports. Engineers make changes. By 1945, the Quonset hut isn't just surviving war, it's adapting in real time. It's a living design, battle-tested across the globe. Proof that engineering under pressure doesn't just solve problems, it saves lives. August 1945. The war ends, but the Quonset huts don't. The U.S. military now owns over 170,000 units scattered across 6 continents. And suddenly, no one knows what to do with them. Originally meant as temporary wartime shelters, they're now sitting idle, perfectly intact, and completely indestructible. The government assumes they'll be scrapped, but the public has other plans. Across America, veterans return home to a country unprepared for peace. Housing shortages choke every city. Construction materials are scarce. Contractors are overbooked for years. In Los Angeles, entire families live in converted chicken coops. In New York, multiple families cram into single apartments. And then someone remembers the military has tens of thousands of steel buildings, strong, cheap, and available immediately. Enter the War Assets Administration. Tasked with liquidating surplus military property, they start offering Quonset huts to civilians. Prices range from $1,000 to $2,500, depending on size and condition. It's a deal too good to ignore. Within months, surplus Quonsets are showing up everywhere. in suburbs, on farms, in cities, even university campuses. In Los Angeles, the city converts 750 Quonset huts into family homes, creating Roger Young Village, a self-contained neighborhood for returning soldiers and their families. The same happens in Chicago, Boston, and dozens of other cities. These neighborhoods, often nicknamed Vetvilles, aren't glamorous, but they're dry, warm, and fast. Perfect for families trying to restart their lives. Adaptation comes quickly. People cut windows into the steel walls, add wood paneling, build porches, and divide the interiors with sheetrock. What was once a military barracks becomes a 3-bedroom home with a garden out front. In Portland, Oregon, an entire community called Fairview Addition springs up. 350 Quonset homes, complete with lawns, sidewalks, and picket fences. Religious communities take note. Churches struggling to accommodate post-war population booms buy up Quonset huts as sanctuaries. In Levittown, Pennsylvania, First Presbyterian Church holds services in a hut for 15 years before they can afford a permanent building. Across the country, congregations worship in what was once battlefield housing because it's affordable, flexible, and available now. Schools follow. With the baby boom underway and enrollment skyrocketing, districts don't have time to build traditional classrooms. One Quonset hut seats 30 students. By 1950, over 3,000 schools include Quonset classrooms, some used for decades. Students learn multiplication tables under steel arches, once bolted together under enemy fire. Small businesses jump in next. Mechanics, welders, fabricators all need shop space. A Quonset hut offers wide-open interiors with no columns, perfect for working on vehicles or storing large equipment. Farmers use them to store grain, house livestock, and protect tractors from the weather. The original designers at Strand Steel even begin producing civilian models marketed specifically for agricultural use. Something unexpected begins to happen. What started as an emergency military solution starts to shape American architecture. The curved silhouette becomes iconic, featured in films, newspapers, and ads. At first, they're dismissed as eyesores, but over time, they come to symbolize something uniquely American: adaptability, resilience, and ingenuity. People stop thinking of them as leftover war buildings. They become homes, churches, schools, workshops. They blend into neighborhoods. They evolve, and they endure. The Quonset hut was never supposed to last beyond the war, but in a country desperate to rebuild, it becomes a cornerstone of that recovery. A temporary shelter transforms into permanent infrastructure, not because of aesthetics, but because it works, and because when America needed to build fast, cheap, and strong, the Quonset was ready. By 1946, the Quonset hut has already done the impossible, helped win a world war, housed millions, and rebuilt a country. But its story doesn't end with peace treaties or surplus sales. It keeps showing up, again and again, in places and crises that its original designers never imagined. Start with disaster relief. In 2010, a 7.0 magnitude earthquake devastates Haiti, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. Relief organizations scramble. They need shelters fast, cheap, strong, easy to transport. The solution? Not called Quonset, but it's the same DNA. Arched steel or composite frames, corrugated panels, flat-packed for shipping, assembled by unskilled crews with minimal tools. 80 years later, the same principles still work, because the problem hasn't changed. Modern shelters, known as refugee housing units, RHUs, echo the Quonset's design. Curved for strength, modular for scale, lightweight for logistics. UN field teams can erect one in under 4 hours. They now house over 200,000 displaced people across Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Quonset design, reborn for a new kind of war. Meanwhile, hurricane engineering rediscovers what WWII already knew. Rectangular buildings get shredded. Arched ones don't. After Hurricane Katrina, engineers study what survived. The curved roof buildings did best, not because they were new, because they were aerodynamic, because they deflected wind rather than resisting it head-on. Sound familiar? Even the tiny house movement borrows from Quonset logic. Sleek, prefab cabins with corrugated steel, arch roofs, and no interior framing. Marketed as modern, minimalist living, but functionally, they're updated war shelters. Some cost $300 per square foot. Others are built by DIYers in backyards. Most of them have no idea they're following in Otto Brandenburger's footsteps. High-end architecture gets in on it too. Design firms create luxury Quonset-inspired homes with floor-to-ceiling glass ends and designer interiors. The arch is no longer just efficient. It's fashionable. What once screamed military surplus now whispers industrial chic. And the military? Still using them. In Afghanistan, Iraq, and classified forward operating bases, the U.S. continues to deploy updated Quonset descendants. Now they feature aluminum frames, Kevlar panels, and climate control systems. Some units unfold from containers like origami. Others drop from helicopters and lock into place in under an hour. But ask any engineer working on them what inspired the design, and they'll say it's a 1942 shelter built in a Rhode Island warehouse. The most mind-blowing legacy? Space habitats. NASA and private space companies like SpaceX are designing Martian shelters based on the same principles. Curved for pressure resistance, prefabricated for transport, and modular for scalability. On a planet with 150 meteorite dust storms, extreme cold, and zero infrastructure, the Quonset Hut's design logic, strongest form, fewest materials, fastest assembly, wins again. Mars might become the next front in the Quonset legacy, because when the mission is build fast, survive anything, use what you can carry, the solution keeps circling back to the same shape. Not because it's nostalgic, because it works. What started as an emergency measure has outlived its crisis, not as an artifact, but as a blueprint. A reminder that when engineers solve a problem perfectly, their work doesn't expire. It evolves. From Pacific battlefields to post-war suburbs, refugee camps to Martian colonies, the Quonset Hut wasn't just a building. It was, and still is, a solution. An arch of steel that carried more than roofs. It carried the weight of war, the urgency of peace, and the shape of the future. If you learned something new, if this story made you see a steel arch in a whole new way, hit that like button, subscribe for more engineering stories that change the world, and let us know in the comments where you've spotted a Quonset Hut still standing today.